Following up on last week's worst moral decisions in Star Trek, we've got 10 more tough calls that were probably the correct course of action. This is not an objective ranking, but purely my view of ethical choices that have done the most net positives in universe.
And we cause ethical dilemma.
Number 10. Tiptoe through the tulips. While TNG's justice was generally laughable as a race and plot, if there were ever a time to ignore the Prime Directive, it's with a race of utopian sex addicts that only have one punishment for a crime, and that's a thorough unaliving. Designating random punishment zones that randomly change for the purpose of population control, I guess, is worth Picard stepping in on Wesley's behalf to just take him home and give him a slap on the wrist. This is Tasha's fault for claiming to read all their laws, and even if she'd done a better job there, she would have let everyone know about the punishment zones. Number 9. Reading Rainbow. Cogenitor is one of the weirdest, most controversial episodes of Enterprise. While Trip absolutely does need to use a bit of discretion with his emotions regarding other cultures, as we see going back to the first episode of the series, he's trying to do what's right at all costs. This is only half of why this entry is here. I simultaneously also agree with Archer's decision to return the Cogenitor to its ship, even if it seems questionable by human standards. Weighing in on a society you just met that relies on just 3% of their population to keep itself stable is way above Archer's pay grade. The episode is tragic in the end, but it's paved with good intentions, and in some cases, what you have to do to avoid upsetting a delicate balance. Number 8. Living Weapon. After Best of Both Worlds, the only follow-up to the Borg in TNG was the episode I, Borg. It gives us a much more nuanced look at the cybernetic race. It forces Picard to take a fresh look at his trauma from being a Borg and some of his own prejudice that comes out of it. The positive moral decision in this episode comes as Geordi and Data come up with a possible way to bring down the hive through math that has no solution. After Guinan, whose anti-Borg sentiments run deep, due to them assimilating most of her race, sees a streak of individuality in Hugh, and she convinces Picard that it's a bad idea to use him as a weapon of war. Though, we'll find out later that simply giving Hugh a bit of individuality was enough to cause a submatrix collapse in his own ship. So just encountering him did some measure of damage to the Borg through individuality, but not forcing a living individual to wipe out their own race is in keeping with Federation ideals, even if the Admiralty gives Picard explicit orders to use it in the future if possible. Number 7. Letting Go. Nereese's boyfriend, Vedic Bareil, shows up in a rare show of solidarity with Kai Wynn, making peace overtures with the Cardassians. He's the one that's done all the hard work in the lead-up to these negotiations, but an accident leaves his body and mind compromised. Through the episode, Bashir slowly replaces more of him with artificial implants, mainly at the behest of Wynn, who doesn't have the same handle on these negotiations that Bareil did. The episode brings up a huge moral question. At what point in replacing the brain and organs are you still you? When it comes to replacing the last bit of his brain, even Wynn has to concede that there's a time to just let go. Odd thinking that Wynn was the voice of moral reason in anything. Number 6. Final Wishes. While Janeway's decision to grant the Q known as Quinn asylum was rooted in Federation law and precedent, it's also an interesting moral choice. When you've experienced literally everything the universe has to offer, is there anything left to live for? More than that, this is a direct analogy to the end-of-life decisions made in our real world. For all the questionable ethical decisions Janeway makes, looking at you, Tuvix, she also makes some correct and complex decisions. Even though this choice signals the end of Quinn, it was what he wanted, and I believe this is a positive choice. Before we head into the top 5, I want to let everyone know that this channel will soon change its name to Best of Trek Dust and Wing. Eventually, it will be just my name, and we're expanding from just Star Trek content into other stuff like general movie reviews, current events, and political stuff. Don't worry, we'll still be primarily a Trek channel, and if you're enjoying the content, maybe consider a like and subscribe. Number 5. Launch the lifeboats. This one may be an odd choice because the final decision isn't the one that we're talking about. In TNG's Disaster, Rolaren proposes separating the saucer, where they know the bulk of the survivors are, from the unscannable drive section with a deteriorating antimatter safety field. While Deanna Troi, forced into command of the bridge that she's not accustomed to, shoots this idea down, it was probably the correct one. Thankfully, things work themselves out for the best, but when you have 1,000 people to think about, the needs of the many need to take priority over the compassion for what might be. Troi recognizes in the aftermath that her advanced rank of lieutenant commander alone hasn't prepared her for the realities of the command structure of a starship, and pushes through the command test where she learns the value of sometimes having to sacrifice those under you to save the rest. Number 4. Preserving the timeline. The moral quandary of Edith Keeler in City on the Edge of Forever is one of the hardest to reckon with across the franchise. In this case, especially for Kirk, a woman that he'd fallen in love with while trying to find McCoy lost in time is the linchpin in keeping the future as they know it. While it's terrible to have to let someone go, it's ethically necessary for the prosperity of billions of lives over the next 300 years. The look on Kirk's face after Edith's date with Destiny is possibly the most chilling in the entire franchise. Number 3. General Order what? In the unoriginally named first episode of Strange New Worlds, Chris Pike makes the decision to disregard General Order 1 to stop the Kylians from wiping each other out with weapons they came to understand after watching the battle near Zahia through their telescopes. The Prime Directive should never be used as a justification to let a society wipe itself off the galactic stage if the Federation can step in and diffuse tensions. I also really like his use of Earth's timeline to show a glimpse of how bad things can get. Number 2. Unlimited power. At what point does a society's quest for energy reach an ethical boundary? The answer in this case is where it affects the spacefaring species around you. The Omega Directive is the only known time that the Prime Directive can be outright disregarded, and I think this policy makes a lot of sense. Considering a single molecule can stop warp travel across a star system, and a handful can stop warp across half a quadrant, it's too much of a liability also to exist, and I think Janeway made the right choice to uphold the directive in the Delta Quadrant, no matter the cost. The best moral decision at number 1? The good of the many. In the Pale Moonlight is well and truly Trek's biggest moral dilemma that seemingly goes against everything we know the Federation stands for. While I'm giving this episode the number 1 best, I could absolutely see someone else putting this on their worst, or anywhere in between. Sisko never set out to unalive a Romulan senator, or a prisoner of the Klingon Empire, but nevertheless, that is the reality of the situation. But with Garrick as his ethically questionable conscience, he makes the case clear to Ben that bringing the Romulans into the fight against the Dominion was the likely last straw in tipping the balance of power in the war. It may have been a dirty way to go about diplomacy, but it's honestly a pretty Romulan thing to do. And what is the cost of safety for trillions across the Alpha and Beta quadrants worth? What's your favorite ethical decision in Star Trek?